Welcome to Speaking of Business, conversations with Canadian innovators, entrepreneurs, and business leaders. I'm Goldie Hyder of the Business Council of Canada. Today, I'm speaking with Chuck Magro. Chuck is president and CEO of Nutrien, the world's largest provider of farm inputs, services, and solutions. How big is Nutrien? Well, think of it this way. Next time you sit down to eat, chances are Nutrien helped put some of that food on your plate. The company supplies more than 500,000 growers around the world with everything from fertilizer and seed to the latest digital tools that increase crop production. Chuck is hardly your stereotypical CEO. He's a die-hard heavy metal fan. Yep, a metalhead. Still walks around town in a Metallica t-shirt. He wakes up every morning at 4 a.m. to write in his journal. And he doesn't golf, he shoots. In today's episode, Chuck talks about his optimism for Canada and Canadians, why the fight against climate change is a great business opportunity, and the importance of prioritizing home life and family. I hope you'll enjoy the conversation. Chuck, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, Goldie, thank you.
It's good to see you. You and I have a bit of a history, so we should disclose that to our audience. We do know each other. We've worked together. But let's start first and foremost by introducing our audience to Nutrien. Who is Nutrien? Why is it that most people here may have not heard of Nutrien?
Well, Nutrien is the combination of Agrium and Potash Corp. And we have a new name, so Nutrien. It is the world's largest crop inputs company that we've built. We've got about 25,000 employees in 14 countries. Proudly Canadian, but we are also an international operating company.
So a true global champion based right here in Canada.
We like to think so, yes.
I just wanted the audience to get a sense of who Nutrien is and who you are as its CEO and how proud we should be as Canadians that this is here. I will return to that theme, but let's go back to the beginning of your own journey. Your parents immigrated to Canada from Malta. We're taping this in December 2019 when Malta seems to be in the news. You don't want to be Prime Minister of Malta, do you?
No, I haven't been called yet.
Haven't been called yet. They're sitting in Malta, and I understand their choices before them were Australia and Canada. Why did they choose Canada?
So my dad was in the British Air Force, and he just married my mom, and they were looking at what was happening in Europe, and they were just going to start a family, and they felt that they'd have more opportunities for themselves and their children to go to another country. And the two decisions, because my dad was an electrician, so a tradesperson, the two countries that were hiring tradespeople at that point were Australia and Canada. You know, I think they had thoughts on both. It was a really close call, but they selected Canada because the way my dad tells the story is they just felt Canada had more opportunity being so close to the United States. So I think that's why they picked Canada. So they borrowed $300 off of my dad's oldest sister, my Aunt Mary, and they came to Canada.
Brothers, sisters?
I have a sister. She was firstborn. She's older than me 4 years.
Now, you were born in Ontario?
I was born in Windsor, Ontario, and my dad worked for Ontario Hydro. Once he got settled, and he worked as a bartender and as a waiter, and he worked at a casino, odd jobs until finally they recognized that he was a tradesperson, and he finally got somebody to do him a favor, and he landed on Ontario Hydro.
How long were you out east?
Well, I grew up there, so I was out east until I went to university when I was 18. I finished my university education in Ontario, and then we left Ontario in around 2000.
It's like we traded. I left Alberta in 2000, so I guess Alberta got the better of this deal. But it's interesting, and I want to come back to this because national unity seems to be a big issue these days. But before we do, tell me a little bit more about what you remember from your childhood, just life growing up in Ontario as a new immigrant.
It was normal for me, so I didn't know anything else, right? My dad worked, and my mom was a dressmaker, so she owned her own dress shop. We were a family of hardworking entrepreneurs, and I was a normal kid. I played soccer and hockey because that's what Canadian kids did back then. And then I worked on a dairy farm in the summertime.
You were 14 when you got this job, I think.
Yeah, so I had my paper route. I started my first job at 12, and I loved that for 2 years. But then when I was 14, I took a job as a hired hand on a dairy farm. And that family, the Mitchell family in Ontario in Nanticoke, they took me in. And I spent every summer for 4 years working with them and spent every meal with them because the farming in the summertime is a really long day. And so they were my second adopted family, and I'm still in contact with them today. But that's where I had an appreciation for hard work and for agriculture and for farming.
In terms of, being an entrepreneur and learning about money and the value of money, do you think those experiences shaped you for the journey that you had ahead of you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't know where to begin. I was making, when I was 14, that's $75 a week, working probably 80 or 90 hours, the hardest work I've ever done in my life. And you have a whole new appreciation for the effort and the hard work that they put into feeding the world and producing a crop and raising their own families.
Talk to me about the values in the home. How did your parents raise you and your sister?
When I look back on my childhood, education was key. So my dad always taught me that you need a strong education, and then you can do whatever you want in the world if you get the right education. Hard work was always part of it. He was a hard worker. My mom was a hard worker. Also, he allowed us to explore our own thinking. No, he didn't kind of lecture me in terms of how to think about politics or religion or any of the big issues of the day. We had lots of open discussions at the dinner table. We sat and had dinner every night as a family, and that's where we explored life and conversation and what was important. And that's how I think I learned my values.
So this journey to becoming a leader, to becoming a CEO, was the education you received, in your mind, the beginning of the journey of you becoming a CEO, or was that so far removed you hadn't even thought about something like that?
Yeah, certainly not the objective of becoming a CEO. My dad was an electrician. So at the top of the ladder when you're an electrician is an engineer. So he sort of led me to, you need to be an engineer. And in order to be an engineer, math and science is really important. And I didn't even know what an engineer was, to be honest with you, when he started to talk about it. But, why not?
Doesn't sound like a plan, much as just a journey.
Look, I never had a plan to become a CEO or, living your life in a boardroom or anything like that. It was so far removed from where I come from. And I have a passion for building things. So I wanted to build a business. And I fell in love with business pretty much when I was 16, 17 years old. That's why trying to have my own money, my own independence, seeing my mom run her own business. My sister today is an entrepreneur, and I have a deep respect for what she does. But there was no plan to become a CEO. I think, people talk to me all the time about, Chuck, I want to be a CEO, and what do I have to do? And it's not really that simple. It's good to have objectives, but to have an objective as CEO, you're going to work your whole life for something you may or may not get.
You said you played hockey and soccer, and did you ever grow up thinking, I want to be in the NHL? I want to be...
Well, if you see the size of me, I know it's never going to... Again,
hey, come on, this is the home of Theron Fleury here. Yeah, we believe in the little guy.
That's true, the little guy. As a child, of course, you have aspirations to become an NHL hockey player if you play hockey. But I also knew that was never going to happen, and an education would probably be a better part of my strategy.
Well, it seemed to work out well. I mean, you make it sound like it was a long time ago, but the reality is, it was like you were 44 when you became CEO of Magro. Mm-hmm. And so you probably came out of your MBA school at 22, 23, something like that. Pretty good run in 20 years.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, luck. Honestly, I had about 20 jobs in those 20 years to get me to be a CEO. And I joke about luck, but
you got to make your luck, don't you?
You make some luck, and you have to be hardworking. You have to deliver everything in terms of your daily jobs. But I had some mentors along the way that took a very strong interest and shaped my professional experience, which I think, if I had one piece of advice for anybody listening, is mentorships are super important, equally or more important than a formal education. But part of it was luck. I came to Agrium in late 2009, not knowing that there was going to be a CEO succession process starting almost as soon as I got there. So how would I have ever known that?
Right. Do you have mentors now?
I've always had a mentor, and they've been different people because I needed different development as an individual or as a professional. Today, I have a mentor that is a retired CEO that's, been there, done that, sits on some prominent boards, and it's less formal now. It's really a breakfast or a coffee just to chat. but it's still important to have a sounding board in life. And of course, my partner, Angela, is a very important part of that as well. But it's always good to talk to somebody that's been in your chair, especially as a CEO.
Well, you raised Angela. Why don't we talk about Angela? Tell me how you met her.
Well, Angela and I met a really long time ago.
High school, right? Or was it even before that?
She was in high school.
Uh-oh. She was in high school.
She was in
Where
high
were
school.
you?
I was in first year university. So it was
I'm sure her dad was thrilled to meet you.
Yeah, it was a blind date, to be honest. It was a blind date through a friend. And we've been together almost ever since.
And you just implied that she's tough on you.
Angela grew up in a great family in a small community, just a few kilometers away from where I grew up. But I never met her until, like I said, I went to university. Is she tough? She's supportive. She's a no BS type of person. She keeps me grounded and she keeps me centered. And, we've been on this journey together for many, many years now.
No, I know you've had the good fortune of being surrounded by some really, intelligent women. There's a major push on now for more women in the boardroom, more women in the C-suite. What are you doing to keep that going?
Yeah, first of all, this is a no-brainer for me. I know it's important that we measure it and we set objectives, but for those leaders that haven't had a diverse team, you're missing something. In fact, you only have half the answer that you're going to need to be successful.
And diverse in every sense of the word.
Every sense of the word. I know we were talking about gender, but every sense of the word. We're trying to do the same things at Nutrien. We've made the commitment. It starts with our board, and we're aggressively trying to be more diverse. And we're seeing the benefits in our recruiting because people are concerned about this right now. And I think it is so important that we get it right. But as I said, I think we can't really function and deliver our purpose and our strategic plan without having just the right workforce. And the way I think about this quickly, Goldie, is you walk through a Walmart grocery store. It's all about food. Look who's buying the food. It's every walk of life. So how do you understand our customer's customer as an agricultural company if you don't have the same representation and the same look as that? So my goal to my team is, quite honestly, is I want Nutrien to look like a Saturday at Walmart.
Yeah, reflect.
Why isn't that the goal? And, I think when you kind of put it that way, it makes it so simple. Of course, that's what we need to do.
When I meet with you and I meet with other CEOs, the tension, or in many cases, the answer to the question, what keeps you up at night, is what's going on in the world? How are you managing that? The trade wars, the tariffs, the attack on multinational institutions, the decline of multilateralism, the unpredictability of the global environment, the slowdown of GDP. Shall I go on? How do you deal with that every day?
It's all real and it's all there. And you can drive yourself crazy, literally, thinking through it all. And I think you have to keep in mind the purpose of your company. So
what is it? What is the purpose?
Our purpose, we state that it's to grow our world. And I think that's really important because we're in business as a company to help farmers produce food. We feel that there's almost an altruistic need, a critical need to do that because there's still people that go to bed every night with malnutrition issues. We also think that we have to be more sustainable. We have to produce food that's more healthy, more nutritious. And that's really what gets us up in the morning every day to fight these battles. The rest of it, if you focus on that and you do a really, really good job, and it's a compelling vision and people will get excited to work with you, over time it will work itself out. And we're big believers in just focusing on our purpose.
Well, many global CEOs are now putting that at the epicenter. Larry Fink at BlackRock and others have come out and challenged all businesses to have a purpose. Next gathering in Davos, we'll be talking primarily about the role of business to do good in society. So despite that, though, businesses come under attack. Mm-hmm. They're fighting uphill battles with stakeholders, with governments and others. What are you doing? What should business be doing to deal with this new reality? And including a reality in which, I didn't mention this, but obviously one of the issues of our time, if not the issue of our time, is climate change. That must be having a big impact on your business. How are you managing big things like that? And what should we be doing as businesses beyond articulating a purpose?
You're right, absolutely. And solving these issues, so let's talk about climate change and participating as a company to really contribute to improving climate change. is not only the right thing to do for the planet and humanity, which, goes without saying, to be honest, but it's a huge business opportunity. And I'm a businessman. So I see this as the best of both worlds. I get to do what's right and what's needed and what's mission critical. But I also think that there would be just massive value created for all of our stakeholders if we can get that right, and if Nutrien can contribute in the right sense to what we would call climate friendly or climate smart agriculture. And that's why we're investing literally billions of dollars in the last just few years to build our portfolio of products to be more sustainable. We're investing in advanced analytics, in new products, in new scientific methodologies to really improve the way agriculture can contribute to climate change.
The other thing that's going on in the world is, of course, this China-US battle. You compete with the Chinese. How do you see Canada positioned to stay out of this battle between the two of them, but also assert our own, influence in the world? How do we get forward in this new world?
Yeah, so we do compete with the Chinese, but they're also a major customer.
Yeah.
They're the largest producer of food, and they're one of the largest producers of many of our competitive products. So it's an interesting relationship like most of the world now. Mm-hmm. So the way the trade war is kind of influencing my world is, of course, the tariffs are raising prices for many of our products, and it's shifting global trade patterns. And to try to pick a side and to understand where that's going to end up is very difficult for us to understand. But again, the way we think about these things are, we're hopeful that this is short-term in nature, but who really knows? But the world needs the food. So the trade patterns will shift, but the overall demand for our products and services are still going to grow because the human population is still growing. And so what we're trying to do is to build a business that can withstand the trade volatility by diversifying where we produce our products, where we invest in different markets. And for example, the US-China trade situation right now, the Brazilian farmer is really benefiting because the trade war is putting the US farmer and the Canadian farmer right on the front lines. And they're really feeling the pressure. But the Brazilian farmer and the Australian farmer are being the beneficiaries of that battle. And we're growing our businesses in both of those jurisdictions. So I can't predict the future. So one way to make sure that we are successful longer term is just to diversify the overall business.
Now, back here at home, an area where I think Nutrien and its predecessors have extensive experience, and it's an issue of our time again, and that is the issue of engagement with Indigenous communities. What are the lessons learned? What's the right approach? How do you see us moving forward in unlocking some of this gridlock?
Well, again, I see it as a massive opportunity for industry. So I'll give you our real life example, right? In Saskatchewan, the Indigenous groups are, of course, a major resource group for our employees, but they're also a key partner for a lot of our contractors and supply partners. And we have a special group that works directly with the Indigenous groups. And what we've found is that there's a really nice win-win-win for the Indigenous groups, for Nutrien, and I think for the community when we get that combination just right. I'm not suggesting for a second we figured it all out. We've had, though, a very good track record of working closely with most of the Indigenous groups to move our business agenda forward and their social agenda forward, because we want the same things. We need a high quality workforce. They want to put more people to work. They need help in their communities. And the way you do that is you build strong businesses to support those communities. And they've been great supply partners for us.
Recently, you accepted the responsibility of chairing a task force for us at the Business Council of Canada, co-chairing it. And in an article, when you were talking about your experience here, you had a bit of an epiphany, I think, in which you said, business has to be about people. Why did you say that?
Because I think we forget, business people, you go to school, you learn a language that is not quite the same language of everybody else, and you sort of speak that talk. And then we try to go to, if you have children, you talk to your children about it, they look at you and their eyes gloss over. They have no idea. And you forget of why the company, again, is trying to do what it's trying to do.
It's purpose.
It's the purpose. And the purpose is about people. So my view, and I'm glad that I was able to participate as a co-chair of this effort because I think it is so important, is we have to get back as business to talk about the impact of what we do, but in a normal sense to talk to people about the impact to their everyday lives. Because our social services and the quality of life and all the things that we all value for ourselves and our children and our grandchildren are built on a foundation of business. But sometimes we don't communicate that properly. And that's really important because I think there's a symbiotic relationship between business and society that we need to get better at speaking to in a more frank manner.
How much of this is our culture? It's been pretty easy to be Canadian. We've had a good run.
We have, and I think like many different groups and societies and countries, we may have gotten a bit complacent because we're blessed. The country is blessed with natural resources. And sometimes it's easy to take that for granted because the market needs those resources and it'll always be there. But what we've seen in the agricultural industry is there's some fierce competitors now. They're really driving their agricultural.
Their culture isn't so complacent, is it?
Well, what I've seen is they've put a focus at the heart of business to drive impacts to quality of life. And look, we have a large middle class. I know everybody talks about, well, really, how big is it and what is the definition? And I don't want to get technical, but it's nowhere near the size of India and China's. And I've been going to those countries for 20 years now. You can see the middle class growing, and it's growing because their economies are growing. And there is a relationship here that we need to understand and be sensitive to.
And yet, here we are in Canada, just witnessed an election in which not a single political party offered an economic growth strategy. We are here in Calgary, a place where a movement is slowly getting steam. There are frustrations with the Federation. I know you have very strong views about this and very strong views about the country. How worried are you about Canada?
Well, it's certainly a situation right now where I think we need to listen to what's being said. It's concerning when people are talking about leaving the Federation. Whether people believe it or not, if it's being said, we should listen. But, my view when I talk to people in Alberta and Saskatchewan, which I spent a lot of my time in, people are afraid. They're afraid of their future, paying their mortgages and their car bills.
The anxieties. The
anxiety is high. So then when you hear that language come across in terms of there must be a better deal or we need to do something differently, it's coming from a place that I think we need to understand and we need to be thoughtful on, okay, well, how do we engage with the conversation and how do we make sure that people are feeling heard?
Well, those people work for you.
We have 8,000 employees in this country. And when our employees talk to us about these things, I think what they're looking for is, okay, what can business do? What can the government do? What can all of the stakeholders do? And I think what you're hearing right now from Western Canada is we're not feeling that we've got a seat at the table where these concerns are being understood, being recognized, and being thought about. And that's, I think, what people want to hear is that they have an equal voice at the table. And I think that that's incumbent on all of us to ensure that we move towards that direction.
There's a lot there to unpack, but let me just ask you this. Are we going to be okay?
I'm an optimist, Goldie. I think that this is I don't want to diminish it because it's not fair to diminish it, but I think that this is something the country can get through. I absolutely fundamentally, in the deepest part of me, believe that we can get through this.
Yeah.
But we need to change because the world is changing. And we have to find the right balance of having a strong, growing economy, at the same time manage the challenges that we have when it comes to climate and other real big issues. But Canadians are up for this task. They always have been. Look at what we did. 2 weeks ago, I was in France and I toured the World War I and the World War II memorial sites. It's the first time I've ever done that. And it was absolutely touching. But the reputation of Canada after World War I, after World War II, we were a name on the world stage. Now, we paid for that with our lives, but we stepped up as a country. And so I think it's in our DNA as a country to rise to these massive challenges. And I'm confident we can. But I do think we need to start listening to each other. We're not listening to each other. We're talking past each other.
Wise words.
I hope so.
Wise words, because I do think that there's a lot of parallels here between the journey of becoming a leader, the journey of building a nation, the journey of building a business. Adversity plays a big role in those experiences. And it's unfortunate because it may take that cataclysmic moment of getting us to focus. And yet, what you're saying here is this is not all about government and not even all about business. Where does society fit into this? Because we as Canadians, I've often heard it said, a country born on third thinks it hit a triple. What do we need to do as Canadians to kind of wake up to this new competitive reality out there, a reality which we're seeing every day, as you're seeing in terms of capital flow, in terms of talent flow? Do you have that confidence that we as Canadians, despite that resiliency you just described, that we're getting what's going on out there?
I think there's some work to be done there. I would just start with our own country. The East needs to listen to the West needs to listen to the East. And we need to remember that we have a common set of objectives here. We want a better life, a better quality of life, a stronger foundation for the next generation. So I think it does start with just stepping back and making sure that we're being more tolerant and listening to one another. Not bipolar views are not healthy and constructive, but you still need to listen. Beyond that, though, I think it is important that Canadians understand what's happening outside of our own borders. The wave of protectionism, the raw competitive spirit that you're seeing in what used to be called developing nations now, I'm not even sure that's the right phrase, because when I look at what's happening in India and China, and, you can look at the Southeast Asia, Taiwan and Singapore, these countries have put policies in place over the last 15 years, and they're attracting capital and world-class talent. They're hubs now for really smart people. And that, at the end, that's what your country's made up of, is your talent and your skills. And if all of that talent and skill is starting to migrate to these startup countries, let's call it, I do worry, because 15 years from now, where does that leave Canada? Nutrien has a really big business in Argentina. And it wasn't too long ago, 75 years ago, where Argentina and Canada had approximately the same economy size. And then Canada, because of really smart forethought in policy, became one of the largest economies in the world. But when I go back to Argentina, I always think about Canada now and thinking, okay, well, are we laying the policies and having the right foresight so to ensure that we don't fall behind in the next 20 years?
Yeah, we're becoming Argentina and the other countries are becoming Canada.
And I'm a little worried that is in fact what's happening, because it can happen overnight. And I think maybe we forget that, no, Canada's Canada.
Yeah.
And there's no way we're going to lose our place in the world. There's no way that people are not going to want to come and join our country from an immigration perspective, or that I can't start a business and be successful in Canada. I'm not sure that's true anymore.
Well, nothing lasts anymore.
That's the issue. Canadian businesses are generally very supported around the world. People like doing business with Canadians because we have a certain style and we do things the right way with high integrity and high ethics.
Values, yeah.
That's key. But I do think that we need to ensure that we're positioning the country, relatively speaking, from a competitive perspective, to win, because I think a lot of countries have gotten that right. And when you look at the World Bank's rankings and all the things that we laid out with the Business Council, we are slipping in the global standards when it comes to how easy we are to do business with and how competitive we are when it comes to the regulatory environment, the tax environment, all these things, people don't really want to talk about, but they're foundational to driving a strong economy for the future.
Well, let's hope that adversity is that lightning rod for action. I know that you've done your part, as I mentioned, through the task force and other things. Let's return as we wind down here to you again in terms of being not just a CEO, not just a proud Canadian, but being a dad and being a husband and having to go through now the responsibility of running this major global champion based here in Canada. How do you do it? How do you get that so-called work-life balance, or what I heard somebody in Tokyo say, life-work balance, because the life part should be more important?
Yeah, I'm not sure balance is real, to be honest with you. I think it's all a matter of choice.
Makes you guilty, doesn't it?
You know, it used to, but the way I think about my different roles as a person is I'm a dad and a husband forever. I'm a CEO for a shorter period of time. So I would always prioritize my family first. But I miss a lot of things. But that's conscious. And my family understands that that is a sacrifice, but it doesn't change the core love and support inside of the family structure. But I try to keep as much balance as I can in my life by, sometimes when I travel too much, because there are times in the last 6 years where I've been away from my family for 150 to 200 nights a year, you do get off balance.
See, I hope my wife's listening. I'm not so bad after all.
This is tough, right? But I talk to my family every day, and with social media now, it's a little easier.
Good enabler, isn't it?
It is. But you have to find a way and you have to fight for it, and it has to be important to you. But I think there is a way. I consider my biggest success as an individual to be my family. And I'm proud of my kids and my wife and what they've been able to accomplish.
What stage of life are they at?
My daughter's in second year university. My son's in his 12th grade. They're healthy, they're balanced, they're trying to find their way through life, and they lean on us and we lean on them. And every hour we spend with them is precious because it's getting less and less now. But it is something that is hard to do, and it's not something that you ever give up on.
Are you a cool dad?
I'd like to think so, but asking them probably will give you a different answer. I don't know.
I've learned some things about you that I didn't know. I have to confess that I must say, I think would make you kind of cool. You are a heavy metal fan.
I am, since I can remember.
Favorite bands?
Well, Led Zeppelin, Metallica, Iron Maiden, you name it. And my son is a metalhead too. And for, he's been a metalhead since he was 13 or 14.
I wonder where he got that.
and we've been to probably 50
Probably
concerts.
abused the kid in the car with his baby seat.
It's something we do together. It's the same with my wife.
Are you musicians? You guys play music or anything?
No, we did when we were younger, but no, this is just a passion for music and spending time together. And we love it. And, people look at me and because I get all these invites and I don't go to much of that stuff.
The cocktail stuff.
Reception.
You're
not a golfer.
Yeah, you're not a schmoozer.
No, I'm not.
And did you not take Angela as her first date to a Metallica concert?
It was one of our very, very first dates together.
And was she a metalhead before that, or is she one now?
So back to the blind date. So when I was getting ready, this is a long time ago now, I was all dressed in black because I was a heavy metal kid, and my mom says to me, "You cannot go meet a young girl dressed in black. It's just not right." And I said, "This is who I am." I knock on the door, and Angela opens the door, and she's dressed in black. So she was a heavy metal chick. So much for opposites attract. I thought you were going to say she's all dressed in white. No, so.
But it's interesting. You just said, it's who I am. Authenticity. How important is that?
It's probably the most important thing. And I am who I am. And maybe I'm old enough now to just be super comfortable in my own skin. But I've never tried to subscribe to the corporate, what a CEO should look like or do. I don't golf. I don't like golf. It's 4.5 hours of just
You're missing out on bliss, my friend, but that's okay.
And that's fine, right? That's what makes the world go around, but it's not who I am. But I like to shoot. So my son and I, we long distance shoot, we target shoot, we trap and skeet shoot. And that's how we spend a lot of our Saturdays instead of on the golf course.
You just said being comfortable in your own skin. Tell me the story. So one of the things that binds you and I is we both love Jeeps.
We do love Jeeps.
I can't think of a better vehicle to have in Alberta in particular, but setting aside we're not sponsored by them, we're not going to make a commercial out of it. You went to go buy a car, and it was not a Jeep.
No.
And you weren't treated very well.
No.
Tell me that story.
Yeah, so I went to buy a car because my car was 6 years old. It was time to change it out. So I go to a dealership. I'll keep the names innocent here. And
How were you dressed?
I was in
Black.
I was in blue jeans and I probably had a heavy metal T-shirt on. And so I went in and they said to me, well, that's not available for you. And I said, well, what do you mean it's not available for me? And they said, this specific vehicle is reserved for important people.
Literally, that's what they said?
Yeah, they were polite about it, but it was like
This is in over your head, kid.
they only get 2 or 3 into the city a year, and they want the right people driving it. So, I am tenacious. So I left the dealership, and I know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. So I pass the word that I'm pretty interested in this vehicle. And they came back that I was the CEO of a company. And all of a sudden now the access was open and I was allowed to buy the vehicle. And so when I told them that it was me, the guy, they said, oh, that's okay. You can still buy the vehicle. And I said, no. And I walked away from the vehicle. It's a small story that actually happened just about a month ago.
You didn't get it?
I didn't want it.
Yeah.
I didn't want it.
What is it about you that prevented you from saying something as simple as, hey, man, I can buy this car. I can buy 2 of them if I like.
If that was really the price of admission, I really didn't want to participate with it. I've never done that as a person or a CEO. If that's really how people think, is that I'm only selling this car to certain stereotypes, I don't want anything to do with it.
One of the things, having traveled with you, Chuck, is you come across more as an introvert style leader. Is that the case?
Yes, very introverted. I'd say almost borderline shy.
And, that's one of the things that seems to come out in more of our members than I would have thought would be the case. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know exactly. Again, it's who I am. I can do it, and I do it it's part of my job.
Yeah, you got to perform when you need to perform.
Yeah. But then I'll need downtime, and it does consume energy. It doesn't produce energy for me. It consumes energy. But I think that's okay because I am more reflective. I am a thinker. And, my daily schedule is, people say is a little weird. I get up at about 4:00 in the morning and I work till, around 6 or 6:30 in my home office. And that's my time where I think and I journal. And then I work out and then I come into the office. So I come into the office quite late, between 8 and 9. Sometimes it's 9:00 in the morning. But by then I've done my thinking and I've built my energy up to what I need to do. But that sets the company in motion. That sets the planning that I think I need to do as part of my job. And
That's also 7 days a week or 5 days a week that you do that?
6. Well, I actually get up at 4:00 7 days a week, but I work 6 days a week. I don't work Saturdays. Saturdays is generally a family day.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you relax?
Well, I relax when I'm with my family. So, it's the standard things. We'll go to Costco, we'll get some steaks, and we'll barbecue on a Saturday night if we don't have a commitment. Even when I'm in Calgary, I don't do a lot of dinners at night in the city. And if I do, I'll probably the guy that's known to have 5:00 dinners. We had one last night. It was at 5:30, but I was back at home by 8:30 at night because I want to have at least an hour or 2 with the family before they go to bed. So that's the important part, is you have to find what works for you.
First of all, I admire your 4 a.m. wake-up routine. I've heard many others who get up at the same time every day, irrespective of work or not. But you also referenced journaling. Now, that's very interesting. I think it might be the first time I've heard that. What goes into this journal, and why do you do it?
Well, everything goes into it. And
I'm afraid what you're going to say about this podcast now. Now I'm nervous.
Yeah, look, it helps me think. So, I don't know why, but there's a connection between my pen and my brain. And so it allows me to get my thoughts out in a way that is comprehensible and actionable. I can't do that by just staring out the window. I need to put it on paper so I can see it and think through it. So it depends on what I'm going through. It could be something personal. It could be something work-related, a combination of both. If you were to look at the journal, you'd look, okay, that's just nonsense. It doesn't mean anything, but it helps me sort of process my thoughts in a way that I can do something with them. And I've tried different things over many, many years, but the journaling for me absolutely works. So I get up early in the morning, and if something's on my mind, I got a blank page in front of me and I can process. And usually by the time I go down to my gym to work out, I have a plan.
Do you ever go back and Like, look at what you said and what you wrote 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I used to do that quite a bit. Now, because of the role I'm in, actually, I'm advised that those books should not stay around.
Why is that?
Well, just because there are work-sensitive material in those journals.
Hard to hack a journal.
It's hard to hack a journal, but just to keep all the records clean, I keep them for about a year, and then I purge them.
So you turned 50.
I did.
Any midlife crises, or was that the car?
No, not the car. At least I don't think that car is a midlife crisis car. But no, I wouldn't say a crisis. But there's always reflection, of course, when you reach whatever the milestone is. It'll be a different age for different group. But
50 is a new 40, right?
Yeah,
we're okay.
That's what everybody tells me. Look, I'm excited about what's ahead for my family and for me. I am. I'm an optimist, and 50 is young still. I would agree with that comment. And there's, people aren't even using the R word at all now, which I think that is a great thing. You can have second, third, fourth careers, whether that's in business or doing something else. And right now I'm just enjoying the moment. Running a company like Nutrien is an honor and a privilege, and I'm going to do it as long as they let me.
So when you look back one day, what do you want the legacy to be?
That we, so not me, but that there are so many people that go into this, built something we are proud of. You said Canadian champion, Canada's proud of, but the 25,000 employees are proud of. That we did something good for the planet, that we did something good for our stakeholders. I want there to be something left that I can look back on and say, I had a small part to do with making that. By nature, I'm a builder, and I think building something is important.
Well, knowing you, I'd bet on you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Goldie. It was fun.
Thanks again to Chuck Magro for being my guest on this episode of Speaking of Business. Subscribe now for more conversations with Canada's top innovators, entrepreneurs, and business leaders. Search Speaking of Business wherever you find podcasts, or visit speakingofbiz.ca, that's biz with a Z, to join our email list and follow us on social media. Until next time, I'm Goldie Hyder.